Hello. While I'm at it, I'll tell you about some other ways about money. Ways about money. Babies. People have what are called babies, but it really shouldn't be called that because although that's a temporary state, babies don't remain babies very long. They become, well, you know what they become. And one of the things that they become is expensive because babies grow for years and years and years, and you're paying for them for years and years and years. It's generally talked of that it's about 8 to 10 years of your working life goes towards paying for your children. Obviously, it depends how many you have, where you have them, and in what state you keep them when you've got them, how generous you are, etc. But the number is something along those lines. So if you wanted to retire 8 or 10 years earlier, you could consider not having children. Okay. Another 8 to 10 years one is normally accepted as obviously again, all depends, the amount that you're going to pay in interest on your mortgage. Now again, children sometimes come into this because they're often used as an excuse to say move to a bigger house. We need to move to a bigger house for the children or something like that. But generally people find some sort of excuse to move to a bigger house anyway and spend more money, and that's another 8 to 10 years of your life not paying the mortgage off but just paying the interest on the mortgage off. So with those you've got another 16 to 20 years that you could consider knocking off your working life. I never went in for this children thing at all. I might have been suckered into it at an early age, but fortunately for me it never happened, and when Mrs. Mystic and I got together it was never ever considered on either side, hers or mine, so that went through very smoothly. On the house thing, we rented this apartment in the south of France overlooking the Mediterranean, all very nice. And we thought, well, is it time to consider buying somewhere? So we looked around. I think it just took one day of looking around the Côte d'Azur to find that it wasn't that the prices were too expensive, because you can always take out a mortgage and work for 8 to 10 years extra to pay off that mortgage. But it was the fact that neither of us liked the idea of being in debt, and it just didn't seem worth it because the type of house that you've got was not really, to our considerations, worth it. So we looked further out and then worked out the amount it would cost and the inconvenience of commuting in from inland away. And that didn't seem to compute. So eventually we worked out that buying somewhere completely away from the Côte d'Azur was the way to go. Here, buy it once, basically decide to stay in it for the rest of your life. You don't decide that, but it's worked out that way. And it was so cheap we just paid cash. It was, easy. But it took a lot of working out. We had to move an awful long way and completely and utterly change our way of working. For the first few years, we closed up here in the winter and we went to the south of France in the winter and worked down there, got enough money in the winter, and then came up here for the 6 months of summer where we'd enjoy ourselves and do up the place. Then we changed that slightly where Mrs. Mystic stayed here and I went off and did longer contracts, just being away for a longer period. It was just something that you had to do to make things work, as it were. Now, so that's all possible. Now, the thing to remember with these things for children and houses and paying tax, that you get this idea, I won't use net and gross, you get the idea that if you get 100% of your money, say you're being paid 100 money per month, and then you have to pay taxes, and that's, let's say, 60, has been left to you, and 40 has been taken off in taxes. It's utterly no use when if you get that whole tax-free amount, that 100, to then spend the extra that you would have spent, would have had taken away from you on tax. In other words, you spend 40 on skiing holidays, let's say. Or if you don't have children and you decide that you can run a new Porsche every 2 years, and you spend the money on a new Porsche every 2 years. Or if you've got the idea, if you just spend the money that you have saved by not doing these things, by enjoying yourself, well, that's a decision that you make, but you won't reduce your working time. What you have to do is have a long-term goal, and you can reduce it by not paying tax, say 10 years, not having children 10 years, and not having a mortgage 10 years. You've got 30 years. Technically, you should be able to retire at 35. The only thing that works against that is if you go frittering off the money on holidays and eating out and generally enjoying yourself. And it's not just that, because what you get then, if you do that, is a desire to repeat it generally. And even if the desire to repeat wasn't coming from, oh, I enjoyed that so much, you do it because you get into a routine of it, and it's almost you have to do it again to justify the last time that you did it. If you stop doing it, you then have to say, well, why did I do it back then? It's very hard to stop doing something that you start doing. So the only way of saving money is to start saving money very early in life. Almost you've got to have a natural predilection to save money. Because if you start spending money early in life, like I note that the people do, I'll say it especially in the United Kingdom and the United States, there is going to be no real way of ever stopping that. The desire will always be to continue to spend money, huge quantities of money, even huge quantities of money that you don't actually have. And this will lead to the people of average people of the United States, United Kingdom, being always on an edge. They're never really saving money, and it leads to the situation that we've got now, where people have to decide in these polls that they would like to now work till age 75 and things like that, when it's possible to, if you get it early enough, to get the saving bug, and then just save and save. And as long as you're careful with money, you work out where it's prudent to put money. That money even grows for you because you keep your eye on it. And before you know it, you can retire and not do any of this working stuff. There's a lot of people say, well, this working stuff isn't too bad. And it's really quite enjoyable. Well, I'll leave it to you. I enjoyed my work, but I very much enjoy the fact that I don't have to listen to an alarm clock in the morning and then go off and do the work. The work was fine. It was just the imposition of having to do something. Having to do taken off one's shoulders is a very relaxing thing, that if you happen to be a spend person, you'll probably never ever get to know the feeling of not having to do, because if you spend, generally you will always have to go out and work. And with so many people being in this situation, you will be now en masse taken advantage of by the owners, managers of the people, the outfits that can give you jobs, to drive down the amount that you will accept, because your neighbour will accept a little less than you, and then you will have to accept a little less than him or her. And it's all going to be a very nasty situation. And basically it's all driven, not all driven, on personal note, it's generally all driven by this desire to spend. Where those holidays and eating out and buying a new car really worth it? Or were they really just covering up, making the best of what is a bad job? I think most of these holidays and eating out and new cars are just that, making up, trying to make what is a bad job, this working lark, seem to be worthwhile. But the holidays don't last long. The eating out doesn't last long, and the newness of a new car doesn't last long. But working, it looks like the new way of doing things, working, is going to now last all your life. Enjoy.